I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Any citizen concerns? No? Okay. We had our last month's meeting minutes. If there's no objections, I'll consider those approved. Hearing no objections, are approved. The appointment for Mr. Christian is going to be delayed. He was unable to make it here tonight, so we'll probably have to have him come up at the next meeting. Next item on the agenda is going to be the Three Meadows Pond erosion control bid, and I'm assuming Dave, you'll be taking
Pass those down because I just realized that I have everybody's copy in front of me. One for Angela too. So this is to continue with our erosion plan for the Three Meadows Pond. This will install erosion reduction on the rest of the north bank and the east side of the pond, and also allow for easier access, at least one additional water access, for easier access for water and fish. We had two bidders who bid on this project. We had three bidders who bid on this project. I sent all of the bids to you via email today. The lowest and best bid was Mark Haynes Construction at $141,933.68. And then what was recommended by the engineer for the city of Perrysburg is that we actually have budgeted for this $150,000. So 5.6% contingency gets us to $150,000. So he recommended that we do that so that we have a contingency on this project should we need it. Which is why it's a weird looking contingency, and the explanation is what was budgeted.
No. That's fine. Any questions or concerns in this?
Nope.
All right. Without any objections, I'll consider 3-0 recommendation. Okay. Next item is the discussion of multi-use paths, and we have Brody here who's going to help discuss that with us today. So I know we have a big map here in front of us.
Some of the backup to the backup quarterback on this one.
So we are our third string quarterback here today.
It was going to be Bridget, then it was going to be Brian Thomas, and that didn't decent out to me. But I was involved in the process of creating the original map of this and kind of setting some of the priorities, so I'm not totally out of place. But the map that you have in front of you includes a lot of information of the currently in place MUPs, things that are in the design phase. There's two different statuses for those: design phase through third-party consultants, and then design phase for in-house projects. So those will soon be turned to green for the in-place. Probably what you're most interested in is the proposed, which is shown in the gray, and that is city staff has gotten together. We had, and I'm not sure if it particularly shows up on this map, but we went through and we outlined all the points of interest throughout the city where we thought bikers and pedestrians would typically gather through the city, and we looked at ways to kind of connect those through the grid system. So long story short with that, I think the map gives you a lot of the information that you're probably looking for. But we did go through and we said, if we were going to try to prioritize these at all, how would we do that? And the three big things that came up to us as being priorities was Louisiana Avenue. That was a main artery into the downtown. Indiana Avenue, and the extension of Echo Junction Road, primarily from Louisiana Avenue to the west over towards the Riverford subdivision. Those aren't in any particular order as far as priority goes, but we identified those as being the three that we were most interested in pursuing ahead of the rest of them, I guess.
So you said, what were the priorities again? I want to make sure I get the...
Priorities were Louisiana Avenue, 199, Indiana Avenue, and Echo Junction Road from Louisiana to the west. And we've prioritized these internally to focus on the portions of those that are within the mile square first, because there were more points of interest in the mile square. For example, it doesn't do us any good to do the area of Echo Junction Road, say west of Fort Meigs Road, if you don't have the connecting piece between Fort Meigs Road and, let's say, 25. There would be that gap in there. So the idea is that we're starting here and we're building kind of tentacles out to go. Some of the proposed things that we have here, like the Hall Prairie Road extension, these are all things, you know, on Fort Meigs Road that could tie into the Slippery Elm Trail at some point. We've got connections shown over the bridge here to Sidecut Park through both the existing in place and the proposed or the in design phase along the river. So these are all things we're trying to be mindful of. You'll see that going out Avenue Road as well. That could point us out in the direction along with East River Road out towards the Chessie Circle, those sorts of things. So we're trying to be mindful of what other jurisdictions are doing. Even though these won't directly connect up at this point, it's still a tentacle that goes out and acknowledges the fact that other jurisdictions have things in those general areas where we're trying to take it to our borders.
I know that there's some semblance of a partial multi-use path on Fort Meigs between Five Point and Roachton. And that's looked at as proposed, but where one of the new subdivisions is there, I noticed that the other day when I was driving by, like right in the middle,
That would be on,
the west side.
yeah, so that would be Coventry on that side. And yes, there is one. This map was actually created prior to that.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
Actually being accepted in the whole deal, so that, just like anything else, it's only as good as when you print it or
Yeah.
do it. But yeah, that's, you're correct, that color will switch over at some point.
Now, one of the questions I'll ask as well, is there a benefit, because one of my thoughts and one of the reasons why I wanted to have the conversation on this as well, is trying to connect our parks system using the multi-use path. So you could drive up to, say, Three Meadows, park your car, take your bike, and jump on it, just like people would do at Sidecut and ride through the Cannonball Trail or whatever. But you could jump over Three Meadows, take it all the way to Rivercrest or Davis Overlook and grab a bite to eat or take a picnic and sit down and eat and turn around and head back. Because I noticed that doesn't really have any access around Three Meadows.
Well, it gets you to the entrance of Three Meadows, so I guess there's different levels of like MUP infrastructure. So we'll call it the Chevy and the Buick and the Cadillac sort of things. This is designed sort of like the interstate highway system, where you can get wherever you need to go. It may not be, you know, a very direct route. But for example, this proposed path that would come along here on South Boundary would take you out to roughly the entrance, you know, to Three Meadows. So it's not gonna, you're gonna travel the main highways and you're gonna get off on an exit and you're gonna take the county roads, you know, to where you need to go. So this is kind of, it's not the Cadillac version of it, but obviously multi-use paths are very expensive to install. So this is a rough framework, I would say, and it's something that could be built on over time. But to get what I would consider to be initial good usable infrastructure, this is going to get you on a dedicated, you know, 10-foot wide path in proximity to all the points of interest in the city. This is going to take you to the front door of each one. No, that's kind of the Cadillac version of it. But
Has there been any conversation about working in conjunction with Team McCog and Perrysburg Township about connecting these two, which would be Carronade all the way to Roachton?
yes, I'm trying to think. It probably wasn't with Perrysburg Township, but I know that we've had conversations with ODOT about trying to span the bridge over 199, or the 199 bridge, like the Echo Junction, Echo Trace subdivisions. We looked at several things. We looked at a standalone bridge like you see over the Anthony Wayne Trail. Was it the Fallen Timbers Bridge or whatever they call that?
I run over that often.
We looked at a couple different options, something completely standalone. We've talked about expanding the bridge deck, you know, that goes over 75 there along 199. We have not talked about if the bridge deck is currently wide enough to strip that for something, but there are conversations. But Bridget is probably more in tune with.
I was going to add, what I was talking about was the Roachton Bridge against 75. Because that would be a way to connect some existing paths. Because right now, I know that this is technically with Perrysburg Soccer Field, you know, we've got McCutcheonville, Roachton. Finding a way to connect those two would make a nice.
The natural would be Scheider Road,
Yeah.
because that's a
'Cause
road that's underutilized anyway.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the bridge over 75 on Roachton, correct? Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I was,
Yes.
because I know you were mentioning the 199 bridge, which I think I think that was brought up in the last meeting. But I'm wondering about Roachton Road, the bridge that goes over there, because that's a narrow bridge.
Yeah, I don't know that we've even talked about that. I mean, obviously, the city jurisdictional line doesn't extend a whole lot further than that, and that might be part of the joint venture we're talking about with the township. That might have been looked at as more of their responsibility to serve residents on that side. But again, I guess what I liked about the plan is we're kind of providing stubs out into our jurisdictions and saying, we're doing our part, providing you a place to connect into. But probably the biggest complaints that I've heard since I've been here have been from the Echo Trace and Echo Junction, or Shawnee Trace and Shawnee Junction, those subdivisions there, feeling like they're disconnected. They're very close, like even in Municipal Park.
Yeah.
You just can't get there.
That's a big complaint that I received when I was running the last couple of times.
We looked at like the Fallen Timbers Bridge like I was describing, and that was probably 6 or 7 years ago. That was about $2.5 million just to put that bridge. And we had a hard time figuring out where to put it. We were looking at, could you jump it over, put it on Perrysburg School's property, one end of it. There was all kinds of creative things we were looking at, kind of up and down, carinate how to get that across. And none of it was ideal because it's already all developed. But I do know that I brought up the existing bridge deck width to ask if the lanes could be offset to one side to allow, instead of having two shoulders, if you could favor one side of the bridge to stripe that out for a multi-use path. And I don't know that anybody's looked into that yet, but I did ask the question.
Appreciate it.
So Brody, and I may I may not have understood exactly what you meant when you said that some of these may potentially would jump in front of some of the other proposed. Did I hear that, or?
No, what I was explaining is that, for example, on Fort Meigs Road, down in the area of 5 Point Road, right now it's shown in gray as proposed. And part of that on the west side of the road, on the west side of Fort Meigs Road, so it'd be the northwest corner of that intersection, that is being installed by Steve Mitchell as part of the Coventry Point subdivision. So you'll see once that's fully in and accepted that portion of that path will turn blue. I think that was blue. Green.
But the city engineer design phase in TMCOG are all the priorities right now, right?
Those are all in the works, I think, is.
Those are in the works, so I guess they've been moved off the priority schedule.
Okay.
Just acknowledged as projects. So then what I would say are the priority things are the ones that I described, those three. And obviously Louisiana is prioritized from north to south. Echo Junction Road is prioritized probably from 199 to the west, and Indiana Avenue is prioritized from 199 to the west as well.
Do you know anything about this little spot on Fort Meigs and 65? That little connecting piece?
Of the gap
By
there
the fort?
in front of the fort?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for you on that.
Love to see how close because that's such a short run. That would add a lot of connection immediately.
Yeah, even if you could tap into the fort's parking lot.
Well, I think that's what it's doing now, because there is kind of a jog there as it goes around the woods there. I believe it's after maybe the church, but it kind of snakes around, and I think they're kind of borrowing from the Fort Meigs parking lot now, which is,
You just can't go from the parking lot
Across the street.
to the street.
Yeah, there's a grass little
Grass,
median.
yeah.
and Definitely walked a bike over from across that before.
I've run it. No, I would love, once we have this conversation, to make sure we get this in the hands of the service committee as well when we're doing road work and construction. I think this is something that would be nice to have that conversation in service as well, to have as an ancillary or a alternate bid is the term. Just to see what it would cost to add in the multi-use path as they're working on the road while they're there.
There was a time when Yark, Chevy, and even Cat, when they were putting in their sidewalks, where we could have done a joint venture, but we chose not to. Is it, how could we create a situation when they're already gonna be excavating and submitting, putting in a sidewalk, that we couldn't contribute to that? I mean, because we missed a couple of opportunities right there.
Well, what I would say is that is because it was, there's no good way to say it, but it was kind of just made up as we went in the past. The city engineer, in some cases, would just say, we'd like to do it here, you know, and it was just kind of piecemeal. As you could see, that we have portions here that don't connect anything. It was just kind of, well, we should do this. I think the best thing you can do to ensure that things like that happen in the future is either, you know, accept this map or add to it so that when these things come up, we say, these are known priorities and we're going to do that.
So could you almost take this map, so say you adopt this map, and you almost do what we do with the sewer for subdivisions, where if they put in the bigger piece, we reimburse.
But there hasn't ever been any clear direction prior to this map is actually a hand-drawn map, maybe a year and a half ago. And even this one doesn't have full acceptance or adoption by council, but I think this should be truly kind of a master plan for that. So
I think it'd be important for us to try to adopt some sort of master plan on this.
And I think that's really the reason this was created, is to say, here's a starting point, here's what we think is a reasonable place to adopt this. But I'll also say that I think there's a point of diminishing returns with having bike paths everywhere.
Yeah.
Because they're expensive to maintain, you know, they're expensive to install, and it doesn't always have to be a direct route to every front door, but this would allow you to safely traverse the city, maybe not in the shortest straight line distance, but in a safe, efficient way. It's very much based on the grid through the major arteries, so.
Now, isn't Hall Prairie, isn't that considered like a national bike route?
I believe Teamacog has it assigned as one.
I'm not familiar with that.
So Teamacog, I know there's bike highways across the nation, and I don't want to say just Teamacog, but I think there was a national push, because I remember us passing something like that. And Hall Prairie, I believe, is actually considered a bike highway. Yeah, all the way to 65 and the 65.
If you go to people that really have like biking, but if you go on Hall
Sorry,
Prairie
let's see if
on
I
any
can
given
pull it
day,
up.
you're gonna see a bike.
I don't feel like it's a road that seems extremely friendly to ride on.
I think
That's-
it's
I don't
not
disagree.
necessarily, but it runs parallel to 25, basically. So I didn't know if potentially you have this artery over here that ends on 65, and then you have that gap in Hall Prairie, that might be another extension you want to consider, but I agree with your point that at a certain point, it's just about getting the main arteries in there. But with that being part of the consideration where we're advocating people go down Hall Prairie, it might be wise to just have something there, because there is that pretty narrow overpass on Hall Prairie over 475.
Trying to pull up the national map.
I remember, I don't know whether it was you that said that or someone else at a council meeting or committee meeting about Hall Prairie, and then I've noticed ever since because I travel down it a lot, being where I am.
I think Jan's talked about that a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, there are bikers there all the time.
Yeah, here's the,
The other thing that's interesting about bike paths is a lot of the folks that are very, very serious bikers,
They're gonna be on the road anyway.
they are road bike riders. And it doesn't matter where you put that infrastructure, they're gonna ride on the road. They wanna be treated like a vehicle, they behave like a vehicle. Yeah, so I don't know, you know, even if we did put in the infrastructure for whether that meets their needs or not.
Yeah, so that bike highway, well, even so, it at least gets the other bikes out of the roadway for them. But the bike highway does do that connection right here
Interesting.
that he's pulling.
And that's something that I didn't know, and I don't know if Bridget or anybody else that was involved in the creation of this map knew that.
So that would be my one suggestion for that, is just that in a gray, low priority.
So you're saying West River Road to Hall Prairie Road, south to,
Where the Hall Prairie Intermediate is.
well, 5 Point Road is also considered one too.
5 Point Road is?
Yeah,
Did they just look for our least safe roads and say,
it's a national map that they created.
it's one?
So it's considered, bike route 90 is 5 Point, and 25 is considered Hall Prairie.
I don't even like driving a car on 5 Point Road. I can't imagine riding a bike.
Well, I know we're working on the,
Yeah.
that's part of the road projects for this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, like I said, it's kind of the sky's the limit with it. We thought this was a reasonable baseline to, make it as a priority map to begin with, but certainly a good point along haul.
And I know this is out of our jurisdiction, but you mentioned Scheider Road. If we had one coming down Louisiana, and we could get across the bridge, we're right there at Roachton Road, and it would be an easier route than going down 25.
Yeah, would we be able to open up that torn out drive and just put a multi-use into
I think somebody opened it.
It
It appears to me as though it wasn't supposed to be open, but it is. Interesting.
Are you talking about the roundabout?
No,
The barricade on Schneider Road, right, in 99.
Yeah, but there's no pavement there,
Mm,
right?
no.
It's just that they took out the pavement. I wonder if they did that for the,
it
Well,
was
I don't-
safety. There wasn't supposed to be one on either side.
Yeah.
They opened one on Buckle Junction side, on the south side. And somebody just, I don't know who did that, opened it up on the other side too.
Huh.
Interesting. So,
I noticed that.
that we could make it official, but that's township, so I don't even know how, if they have any interest in that.
But again, the grant side of things that they pick, but
But when you look at that, what Scheider does, it really ties into Roachton.
Yeah.
well, we could, we've put township in master plans before. Lessons learned.
all right, Corey, you're not allowed to have any comments anymore.
It might still be too soon, I don't know.
I think that this is a good starting point. Personally, I would still love to find a way to connect all of our park systems through this. I know that may not necessarily be achievable, but if we have something to at least start with, we can grow from there. I actually would enjoy sending this over to service as well, just have some conversation, because I see a good benefit of trying to do these in conjunction with road projects as well. I don't know, do we want to make an action or do we want to hold off and?
I would say hold off. I would table it for now, but I think we should do it in the next meeting or two. Maybe make some slight corrections and put it before.
It would be nice to have Brian here and Bridget as well. who
Yeah,
worked
we
on it.
usually have
Yeah.
Mark or Becky out in the crowd too.
Give some time to talk about it, but yeah, if you can email it to the service committee members, I think that would be a good one as well, just so that way they can map.
No pun intended.
Any,
You get one more.
That was a high level pun. I'm pretty
Get one
proud
more.
of that one.
One more.
any other thoughts or questions on this multi-use path before we move on? All right, hearing none. So one of the updates, I know we had asked at the last rec committee meeting to talk about dog parks. PrAC did take that up. They gave some suggestions here. Let's see if I can find my notes. So they looked at all the parks and they went through each one individually and had the conversation on the benefits. They came down with really 3 locations. 2 of them are parks and 1 of them is not a park. So the first is, one of their primary focus was actually Three Meadows. They thought that towards the back end of the pond may be a good location to have one, especially if there is a way to even incorporate the water into the park. There is a service road that goes along the highway that is with the city by the apartments, and another one that comes in. I'm looking at my head here right now. That comes in where the parking lot is. The other one, the second option they said is Orleans. Their only holdback with having that being the first one is accessibility. They see that there's a benefit of having a dog park, but their concern was the accessibility of Orleans Park. And that's really what kind of brought me to bring in this plan here, because I'm hoping to have the conversation with as well. And then the third one was actually behind the service building. So there's enough space back there that came up as a topic of conversation that there may be the ability to have something like that near the actual water tower over there. So those were the three options that they came back with, saying that they think the dog park would be great, but these are the parks that they would really like us to focus on.
So it's bicentennial, they did not consider it?
Bicentennial, they just said there's two front houses, and the concern would be the parking and everything else, so.
I got an email from a resident near Bicentennial Park opposing,
Jackie.
in favor of a dog park, I think it was, but opposed to Bicentennial.
Yeah.
Jackie.
Yeah. The other concern they had was more or less parking over there, that if it is heavily used, there could be some issues with parking, but I know you live there, I live there. but
I
I'm
get the
indifferent.
concern. If you live out there, I think it's a hidden gem that you don't want anybody to disturb for any reason because you have free access to this open land. Do I think it's actually a reason not to have a dog park there? Absolutely not. But if PrAC is identifying 3 other good locations, I'm not going to push it.
No, and that was one of the things that, and they're perhaps going to go over this plan that we got here for Orleans. And Orleans actually in this plan has a dog park actually mapped out in this. So I was hoping that we could have a discussion on this as well. I think that a dog park would be great moving forward, but it looks like that we may be able to look into this plan. I know Bridget's not here right now to follow up on the conversation we had last month about the access points. Did that come up at all in the conversation at the meeting about access into Orleans?
In and out of Orleans.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple things, I guess, that I've listened to through this. One of the things that I had pointed out was that one of the limiting factors of access into Orleans Park is obviously it's not really an issue getting in there from Front Street because you just take the road around to the right. That's pretty simple. The problem comes when you come down Boundary here. That's not really a problem because you're making the right in, but it's leaving this site. There's people that are just making a right, turning in here and going back out because it's so congested. One of the limiting factors is the distance that you see on this curve here. Part of it is the undergrowth and things that are in this area. It really inhibits the view of being able to see that. Cars are speeding up to go over that bridge. So you don't have a lot of visual distance to see those cars coming. So you're just kind of pulling out and just going for it. One of the things I identified through some measurement tools was that we might be able to shift this drive entrance closer to the bridge. The traffic coming off of the bridge is at a higher elevation, so you're able to see that, and the geometry is different, that angle. So one of the things that we've talked about is taking that entrance drive and possibly pulling it closer to the bridge. That way you have more of an equal sight distance to your left and your right. That would buy you more time pulling out and making that left-hand turn coming back into the city. That and clearing out some of the understory there of those bushes. There's honeysuckle it's just junk invasive stuff that's out along the roadways that's really blocking that view. So that may be another opportunity. This plan actually calls for that. I don't know if you can read it on there, but it says the clearing of the understory out along that road. I think that would make it a lot safer. And I did hear Brian Thomas talking some way about trying to reconfigure this intersection here at Front Street to see if it's possible that there could be, as part of that signalized system, a drive that could go straight down, may pull in and out that direction. It's quite a grade change, but I do know that he had mentioned that he would be interested in looking at that. I don't know if he has or not, but.
Yeah, the intersection is going to be a nightmare to work on if you do anything, because it's just so bottlenecked right there that you are going to shut down a ton of traffic anytime you mess with it.
Does this not allow me from doing anything?
Well, I'm just saying, to me, you look at it, it screams roundabout as an answer. But my God, to put one in, I don't even want to live through that, to be honest with you.
I'm not sure you would.
Yeah, correct.
So make sure you do that during the next election cycle.
Yeah. Let's say it came from Southeast, creators of Perrysburg.
So even if we were able to move that drive into the park, which we probably should do anyway, just so that the park has more use and you feel safer going there, 100% of all the dog owners that would use the park would have to drive. That's whereas, and I'll just use Three Meadows as an example, at least 20% of the city wouldn't have to drive. And in terms of locating it, 100% of the people have to drive to the one behind the service building. And I'm just using car driving as one of the,
And that was one of the conversations they had as well, is the accessibility, and that was one of the things that they knocked on Orleans. If we can figure out the accessibility, Orleans, they said, would probably be the best fit.
accessibility meaning this road.
The road, yes.
So driving to it is not an issue for dog owners.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an issue for dog owners to drive to it, because typically they have to drive anyways to go to the dog park. They're not gonna walk their dog 2 or 3 miles just to get to one.
I bet they walk them around Bicentennial.
Yeah.
I bet they walk them, when you're by a park, you're gonna walk your dog.
Oh, yeah, people will take their dogs, yeah.
So,
I think it's a really good point, Barry, honestly. Like, if you're closer to a population center, and that's why I honestly think Woodland would be a decent spot, because people walk to Woodland Park.
So
People walk to Bicentennial.
The concern they have with Woodland Park is with the Frisbee golf. And I'm trying to remember what else they mentioned with, is, again, not enough parking if people were looking to drive, and trying to find the right place for it, because the noise, their concern was more of the noise of the dogs.
Are dog parks that loud? I mean, it's
I
been a
don't-
while since I've been to one, but I've
I've
never
never-
been to a dog park and thought this is too loud, because usually they're
Yeah.
like exercising rather than barking at each other. So from my recollection, any barking's pretty short-lived.
No.
But
Well, one of the other reasons that Woodland Park came up is, or not Woodland, I'm sorry, Three Meadows came up is, once we get the erosion control done around there was a conversation about having a walking path that went all the way around the pond. And having that as a conjunction with that walking path of where you can end up at with the dog park would be another benefit.
I think
But that was one of the reasons why they had that as, number one is, to your point, that there are people that can walk to it and don't necessarily have to drive as well.
I think it would be more utilized. So you don't, all
Yeah,
those don't have to get into a car.
Well, and I think that would service, I mean, those are smaller, multifamily places too, where pets are kind of cooped up. So I think you're gonna have a lot of people that are walking their dogs in a park out there. The dog park might be extremely effective out there too.
I guess the counterpoint to that, because initially I was kind of agreeing with that, is that, for example, Bicentennial Park, if there's people walking their dogs there now, that's a close asset that they have. And if you put the dog park there, you're just doubling up on that asset, as opposed to if you are catering more towards the people that are gonna be driving, you could preserve that open walking area, people are already using it for that. Because some people aren't a big fan of dog parks, they don't want their dogs mingling and rolling around with other dogs and worrying about germs and all that kind of stuff with dogs, so.
No, you're right.
So maybe we acknowledge that as an open space asset for dogs where you can walk and run them and maybe take them off leash and throw a Frisbee or something because it's open. I'm sure people do that. Actually, I've heard of people doing that.
Unfortunately, I've seen people use the playground at Woodland and the playground at Frank Elementary, because it's got a fence in there, to let their dogs do the same thing.
They do it to the municipal baseball fields too.
No, there's that too.
I missed that, Kate.
They also do that to our municipal baseball fields.
Because they're fenced in part, large part.
And personally, I don't want them using it in a playground area, because my kids play on that, and who knows what the kids could end up stumbling across or.
Well, and really, that's the whole purpose of a dog park, is so you can take it off the leash and let it run. You're not supposed to do that in a park, so, and that's
No.
the whole essence of it.
So what's this, I know we're getting a lot of conversation going on this.
Well, I would be inclined to kind of listen to Craig's suggestion.
So looking at Three Meadows first, and then seeing if we can find a way to.
Yeah.
I am curious what Service would say about servicing a dog park.
No.
Have you guys discussed
So,
what that would entail?
Greg was there as well at the PrAC meeting and gave some input, and he was one that even brought up the area behind the service department as a possible option, because service is already there. They know that they're going to have to clean up, but we would have the mutton mitts or whatever. One thing that we found out is I think we spend about $4,000 a year on those mutton mitts. I don't know if anybody knew that around town.
At regular,
Just the people used to clean up after their dogs and on the parks.
They just like the plastic bags.
Yeah.
Is that what
yeah,
you-
but then like
It's a-
They are like a mitt.
So it's easier to grab.
Put it over here.
I got what you're saying. I think
So
that's number 3.
I guess the way that I would look at having a dog park is we would put on there to clean up after your own dogs. Try to do the same thing. If we start to have an issue with it where people aren't taking care of it, then we just
Take it away.
get rid of it with the expense of the fence.
Well, I imagine it's gonna be more than a fence that's in there.
That's gonna be heck of an expense just to say behave or else, right? I mean,
Depends on how much I guess the way I look at it would be, lack of a better way, just kind of drawing a picture. You get the fence, a run one for small dogs. Big dogs, you have to have the little gateway in order to have them walk in there, unleash them, and open up the next fence. And not make it too extravagant at first to start it off, just to see how the use is. And then if people like it, we start to see positive with it. People aren't abusing it, we can always look to expand it further if we need to.
what does our zoning say about this?
I don't know that we talked about that yet.
So we got a lot of different,
Because we don't randomly allow fences, right?
Especially
I mean-
fences.
I understand the simplicity of it.
I understand. It is,
We'll need a new definition for dog parks, and there's an exception in about 39 different chapters of our code.
no, it's just Brody's response got me on that one.
Especially changing.
I think this is something that we could look at maybe a little closer, see what the cost is gonna be before we make any committed steps to see if it's achievable. I think we got a good direction from PrAC on where they would like to see us do this, but if Orleans ends up being the better option as part of this, that's something, again, I know with this plan we have here, this is not something that's gonna all happen overnight.
Well, I don't think we only have to have one dog park necessarily either. At the end of the day.
True.
I mean,
The only
that would be east side of town, west side of town.
The only thing that I am aware of is that in discussing with other jurisdictions kind of lessons learned about dog parks is 4 separate spaces were recommended. So you had the small dog and the large dog, but then you alternated you had a second small dog and a second large dog because the turf gets so beat up from the dogs that in speaking with other jurisdictions, that's what they regret not doing. Is
Gotcha.
not
They were talking about actually 3 of them. The Metro Parks was talking about 3 of them to like actually rotate them almost like soccer fields. You know,
Yeah,
like
the
that.
same way we do.
Because I think, yeah, the small dogs don't do near as much damage as the
I'm
big
sure they
dogs,
don't.
but- And then doing that buffer zone too.
My in-laws have a couple chihuahuas, I could beg to differ on that one.
No, they bite people, they don't hurt the grass.
Is there a recommended space allocation?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I just remember that the discussion was from other jurisdictions like Toledo and stuff that have done this already, when they say lessons we've learned are you want to be able to rotate the turf because this is really hard on the ground.
Makes sense.
And then if you don't, you have a mud park instead, which
Well, is it,
some dogs would love.
well, I guess it'd be worth looking into, it depending on how big we're going, whether turf is effective too. 'Cause I know going to a city and you have the turf dog park
No.
where they can, I mean,
A lot of these stadiums are gonna start pulling their turf up,
yeah.
so it's gonna have to go somewhere. Used.
Yeah, so that, I mean, I know there's certain types of turf where, that's your lawn in the city and you can let your dog out on your turf yard and not have any issues with the cleanup either,
As long
so,
as you clean it up.
yeah. Well, it's, I forget, it's, yeah, you're supposed to spray it down every so often if you don't get a rain or obviously pick up the solids. but-
So should we not be talking to other jurisdictions that have these so we can get a best practices, size-wise?
I think that's the step we're
I think
on,
it's a fair.
yeah.
Bowling Green has one.
Through the dog warden. The dog warden has one.
The other dog parks they had were the old schoolyards that already had fences.
Okay.
They dedicated those at one point, but I don't know that those still exist.
The last time it was the only one they had was down at the dog warden, but you had to have us go through a process in order to get access to it versus it just being a come at your own risk. My fear is us overcomplicating that aspect of it. I don't think we need to manage and monitor it.
Well, I think you have to put up signage
We
that
put
they
signs,
have to be
yeah.
registered and like up-to-date vaccinations.
Yeah, I look at it the way that they have the what's the Metro Parks that have it right by the high level bridge.
Mhm.
They have one where they just have a fence around it, use at your own risk, and then they have a list of rules. By those rules, you can't come back anymore. And it just has a number for them, which is the park ranger, but we could easily just put a non-emergency just to report anything, but I think it's a fair point I think the next step is to gather information to find out what would be the best way to look into that and see what we can do. I don't know. Probably just ask to see if we can get a report on that by the next committee meeting, or is that fair?
I think the goal for next meeting should be identify a space in Three Meadows that it actually fits, once the research done on the metrics that you need, the space you need.
Hey, Jim. You want to say your name and address for the record? Yeah, I'm just.
It's just information or whatever, but is anybody, I'm listening to all the parts being considered or whatever, and I can see Three Meadows, but I can also see the problem with parking and other things. There's a very nice area that I think you could put a dog park in, one lot of a whole lot of people, and it's a very underutilized park, and that's Bicentennial. There's that whole field that John had thought about putting in soccer fields. Another thing, I don't know where that's at. I don't think that has happened or whatever, but, big area, good run.
Prac overwhelmingly nixed that one. Prac overwhelmingly nixed that one. They did not want to see it there. The Prac committee did. They said no.
How many members of PrAC live right by just
Just one.
Just out of curiosity.
Just one, as far as I'm aware.
Because I agree with you.
That would have been my inclination too.
Bicentennial City Center, it's surrounded by residential, and
Some vacant land.
parking is not an issue unless there's a baseball practice.
I don't necessarily disagree, but I'm not going to go against Prac.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's my only reluctance too, but
And I live over there, but Prac very overwhelmingly was against doing the Bicentennial area. And so that was pretty unanimous at that point.
Was there a reason for it, or just
Their concern was
noise.
just the noise and too close to residential. They wanted it to be somewhat far from residential, not too close, but close enough that people could walk to it, but not right up on people's homes. So. But
I don't disagree with anything you said.
Brody, I think it's gonna be important how it looks. Right, so hopefully you can
The only other
take
thing
a
I
gander
would
at that.
mention to you is, then how about looking at not an existing park, but one that we would like to see happen anyway out there on the Court extension, in that wooded area and stuff. And there's also that area that's going to be in front or whatever, that you have an opportunity to actually design it and figure out what would work out best before, instead of going in and disrupting another part, and then it would be in place, and then you're not going to have the problem of encroaching upon existing neighbors. And at this point, there's nobody else pretty much around there other than on Court. So
I think the owners of Court would have words.
yeah, well,
Even more so than the people surrounding Bicentennial.
and that park area was talked at Prac as well. So they looked at that one too, and that was one they nixed too, for the same reason they nixed Bicentennial. Even though it would be more accessible for people who are walking, their concern was just too many homes right nearby there.
Does anybody on PrAC live in Three Meadows? Or near them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know.
I'm just curious if people are trying to push this dog park away from them.
One of the things that I can talk about Orleans Park and through our planning process is the dog park intrigued us, really for two reasons, because there is very real opposition from neighbors, whether it's a fear or reality,
Yeah.
concerns about that. The other thing is the environment for a dog park. A lot of dog parks that you see are 4 or 6 foot chain link fence in the middle of an open area. Maybe there's some stimulus items inside their pipes or ramps or something like that, but there's really no shade. And that's really important. So we thought the environment which we could put it down in Orleans Park would provide tree canopy and shade and that sort of thing, and maybe a little bit of topography to keep that interesting. But I think shade is very important for dogs when they're out,
Yeah.
running around. So we thought that was, for those two reasons, that was attractive to Orleans Park.
And that was one of the reasons that they thought about that as well, that it wasn't near anybody's homes.
Because people have concerns about sound, they have concerns about their safety. What if a dog gets out and it attacks them or their children, and the smell is the other? And we're like, well, for that reason, that makes perfect sense. But
So what are the city's plans behind the service building? I'm just curious, what's the master plan?
I don't believe that there are any plans. I know that Todd Friesner owns the majority of land back behind there. I think we had to acquire some from him to actually do the water tower and the expansion. So I'm not sure how much more available land we have back there. I'd have to look at the maps and see. But Todd Friesner is the major landowner back there.
I never remember, I got another meeting I'm supposed to get to at 7:30.
Yeah, I guess, so next action steps is to hopefully hear from the city on some potential options here and come back with a place that might work in Three Meadows. I know we got an idea here for Orleans, and we can have a conversation on that.
And if you could have a potential location on Bicentennial, I'd be curious to look at it.
All right, just remember that came from Councilman Coolman.
Yeah, that is fair, that's fine. No problem with that.
All right, and then I did ask to have an update on the ARPA funds in relation to the playground equipment. I believe those are out for proposals right now from the conversation I had with Bridget today. So Brian's working on getting some proposals on those, if I remember correctly.
Putting together the bid documents.
Okay.
We went through and basically itemized all the pieces. I think the company's name was Game Time, that was basically saying, these are the pieces that you need. And my understanding is it's going to be bid as that item or an acceptable alternate, because there's other companies that make very similar products. So he's putting together the bid specifications for the 3 parks, which was municipal, Fort Imagination, and I'm blanking on
Bicentennial.
Bicentennial. Those 3, and he'll have those wrapped up soon and get those out for bid.
So no update on that. So we'll hear more on that one coming up. And I know that they're going to send that over to Prac to review as well. Any other business for the good of the order?
The one thing that I will mention, I was kind of spearheading the Orleans Park Master Plan. Our intention was to probably present, Will Harbauer was on this group, so we assume that he's going to kind of carry the torch back to the Prac Committee for that purpose. I think you've all now seen it through some way, shape, or form, but to have Tim Bachbrider come in and at a committee of the whole meeting for City Council to kind of roll this out and answer questions, and maybe go over some of the costs and
That's fair.
potential funding sources and possible phasing.
So would this or would this not include the moving of that entrance? Because that seems would be helpful for the dog park, helpful for the park itself.
It'd probably be helpful all the way around.
Right. Why would that not be included in this master?
Well, these 2 processes were kind of happening at the same time, so the consultants were like, well, we have to go with what we know, and that's the layout here.
Gotcha.
They actually, the timing of this was so strange that it was actually occurring at the same time as the design of the parking lot, the resurfacing of that's happening down there now. The consultants actually had a version of this which was a more organic looking parking lot. If we had to make like 11th hour decision, do we change the parking lot design to match kind of the master plan that was very organic, kidney shaped, or do we just acknowledge the fact that the parking is getting redone, it's already been bid, that sort of thing. So these 2 things are really converging quickly. So it's not incredibly disruptive to this plan to end up shifting that driveway down. So I think it's important from a feasibility and safety issue to to consider moving the drive, but moving the drive doesn't blow this plan up. Does that make sense? I don't think, I mean, obviously nothing's been budgeted for construction on this, so we're still a little ways out, so. I believe Bridget and Brian were kind of in the driver's seat of figuring out, does it make sense to move the drive? Are there some other things that we can do? Brian was having conversations with ODOT. Is there any type of signalization that we could do, any type of roundabouts that we could do? My personal opinion is that we go in there, we clear out the understory of that and see how that changes the dynamic, how you pull out. If you can see, another 150 feet, 200 feet, that may be a significant factor that we haven't experienced yet. So I think that should happen regardless, because part of the mayor's intention with this is letting people, as you drive past, see into the park, inviting people into the park, where it's just a solid green row now that you can't really, you might catch a glimpse of the parking lot, but you don't really know what's back there. We kind of wanted to open it up and welcome people into the park. So before we would spend any money on signalization or moving a drive, I say we clean it all up, improve the view as best we can, and reassess and see, does it still make sense? What does it cost? And is that worth it?
Sounds good.
Anything else? With no objections, we'll adjourn.